Something lurks in the depths of this murky swamp. Something ancient and terrible. Black bubbles rise and burst in the foul sludge, which roils and hisses as noxious fumes escape its loaden surface. This is the Poison Waste, a vast mire choking the southern edge of Tiranon. On the western shore is the village of Zul-Andra, little more than rotten shacks on the swamp's edge, with damp beds and mossy tables lit by the sickly green glow of campfires. The people of Zul-Andra are an eclectic mix of different races. Gnomes, elves, ogres and men live here together, united by their common worship of the god of the swamp, the great serpent, Zulrah. East of Zul-Andra, a crude dock stretches out into the Black Lake, where a small rowboat floats. The elven priestess Zul Gwenwynnig stands nearby, claiming that she has a sacrifice to prepare. A gnome child shivers in the cold. He is the chosen one. He will soon meet Zulrah face to face, and his sacrifice shall fulfill the sacred contract that protects his tribe. The child knows that he will die, but is not afraid. He says that the nutrients of his lowly body shall nourish the mighty Zulrah, and he shall become one with his god. He was chosen by the High Priestess Zul-Harsinka, who explains that volunteers offer themselves gladly, knowing that their sacrifice is for the good of the tribe, and that she will grant the child's family extra rations of food. This food is the sacred eels that swim in the swamp. As Zulrah sheds its skin, its scales fall to the bottom, where they are consumed by the lowly eels. Once someone eats them, they become one with the tribe, shunned by their original families and tribes as unclean creatures. With no other choice, they must remain here in Zul-Andra and worship their new god. Zul-Anul and Zul-Arith are two men from the Tyrus camp to the north, who became separated from their scouting party and found themselves lost and out of rations. Eventually, they stumbled upon this settlement and were allowed to eat of their sacred eels, but when they returned to their camp, they were driven out and called unclean. Their home is now here, in the swamp. Zul-Harsinka describes Zulrah itself as the all-powerful snake god of the southern wastes. He rises from the swamp to show his divine majesty and to accept our homage. According to the High Priestess, long ago our forebears came to this place, not realizing that they were trespassing in Zulrah's domain. He arose from the swamp in wrath, and many were slain. But Zulrah, in his mercy, allowed some of those transgressors to live, sparing them the punishment they deserved, and allowing them the chance to repent. Then my mother, oldest and wisest of the tribe, dared to intercede with the mighty Zulrah on behalf of her people, and thus a sacred contract was declared. Zulrah granted us the right to dwell in his lands, and to eat of their bounty. None shall ever drive us out, for Zulrah protects us. All he asks in return is a periodic sacrifice at his sacred shrine. As long as the sacrifices continue, Zulrah will let us live peacefully in his lands. So devoted to Zulrah are the people here that they do not fear their demise at his hands, nor do they mourn the sacrifice of their family members. Zul-Shere, the mother of the sacrificial gnome child, is elated that her son has been chosen, calling it the greatest honor to which any of them can aspire. The sacrifice's brother, Zul-Gutasoli, is jealous and hopes that next year, when he comes of age, he will be allowed to go. But the player will not allow this to stand. They offer themselves as sacrifice in the child's stead. Though surprised, the priestesses recognize the player's devotion to Zulrah, and Zul-Gwenwynig rows them to a tiny island in the middle of the swamp and leaves them there, alone. After a moment of silence, the god rises from the murky depths, a colossal, hooded serpent, with only its head and tail visible above the surface. The player is trapped here, on this tiny U-shaped island, as Zulrah attempts to claim that which has been offered to him, attacking using ranged in a serpentine green form, magic in a blue tanzanite form, and melee in a red magma form. At some points, Zulrah will summon snakelings. Apparently it's spawn, miniature versions of the god which swarm the player. It is a considerably dangerous creature, but ultimately it is just that. A creature, not a god. But Zulrah is not dead. Upon returning to Zul-Andra, the player can inform Zul-Gwenwynig that they have managed to kill her god. But she will reply, "Is that what you think? Board the boat again, and I am sure you will find Zulrah has overcome whatever pitiful attacks you used against him." Zulrah lives on, seemingly healed by the poisonous waters of its swamp. In the current day, Zul-Andra is one of the most fascinating and unsettling places in Gielinor. Somehow, a symbiotic relationship has developed between a powerful serpent and the people it has ensnared. They live in squalor here at the edge of the world, completely trapped, dominated, yet content to serve their god. But how did this happen? What actually is Zulrah, and how did its cult form? In a rotten crate near the High Priestess, the player can discover a damp, ancient diary written by a man named On. 5th Benath. Another day of being lost in this terrible swamp. We can't go north again. The clans will track us down in the woods. Mortarium and his son, little Onan, have been trying to catch some fish. They've had no luck catching anything in the sea, so now they're trying for eels in the swamp. At first I thought I'd rather starve than eat something from out of the swamp, but it's been so long since we had food. Anything's got to be better than this. How did this swamp even form? It doesn't smell natural. That old gnome woman and her children seem to know something about it, but they're not telling. The daughter let slip that they're from some kind of settlement in the eastern mountains, though I've never heard of a gnome town there. 6th Benath. Mortarium and Onan are still having no luck catching eels. To be honest, I think we should just go back up north and take our chances with the clans. Nothing can possibly live down here. 7th Benath. A terrible night. Turns out something can live in the swamp after all. It came in the night. Some kind of colossal serpent, all fangs and lashing tail, spitting venom and breathing toxic fumes. It ate 5 of us before we were all properly awake. I've said we should leave this place. I'd rather face the clans than be eaten by a giant snake, but that gnome woman's got a plan. I don't trust her. On the other hand, no one else has any ideas. Still, I really don't trust her. 8th Benath. That was the horrific horrific thing I've ever seen. The gnome woman had a plan, all right. If I'd realized what she was going to do, I'd have walked straight out on my own. She'd made us build a big campfire by the edge of the swamp, where the snake appeared yesterday. As darkness fell, we gathered by the fire, waiting for the snake to return. Which it did. When it rose out of the swamp, ready for another meal, there was the gnome woman holding little Rentos, her son. She shouted to get the snake's attention and held Rentos out for it to eat. He was screaming, but she didn't bat an eyelid. She handed him straight to the snake. One gulp later, and Rentos was gone. Then the snake turned back to the gnome woman, and she spoke to it. I thought she'd get eaten for sure, and serve her right, but the snake listened to her. Turned out that was her plan. Feed little Rentos to the snake to get its attention so she could offer a deal, and it worked. She promised the snake that if it let us live, and didn't wipe us all out, we would bring it regular sacrifices. She even promised that we would worship the snake as our god, forsaking Seren, and we would be its people. Well, it seems to have worked. The snake retreated into the swamp, and we're all still alive, except for poor little Rentos. 9th Benath. Mortariums finally caught some eels. They look and smell dreadful as expected, but everyone's so hungry that we're going to eat them anyway. That crazy gnome woman says the eels must have been sent by the snake god. She thinks he's accepted her deal and is letting us live here on the condition that we send him sacrifices. So she thinks that the snake is sending us eels to feed us so that we can, in turn, feed him. The horrible thing is that she seems to be right. The snake's kept away ever since she fed Rentos to it. Her daughter doesn't seem to mind either. I don't get it. If I had a brother and he got fed to a giant snake as part of a demented bargain, I'd scream my head off. The girl must be as crazy as her mother. 10th Benath. It's the 3rd day now since that gnome woman turned us into a food farm for the giant snake, and every day I find more reasons to distrust her. She's taken over the whole group now, and is calling herself the High Priestess of Zulrah. Oh yes, she's decided the snake is called Zulrah. Can't imagine where she got that name from. Now she wants us all to change our names to honor Zulrah, so I've got to call myself Zul-On. 11th Benath. That crazy gnome woman says it's time to make another sacrifice to Zulrah. She's made a big speech about what a great honor it would be for the chosen sacrifice, and how their death would form part of the contract between Zulrah and our people. The people are believing every word of it too. Some girl even started shouting, "I volunteer as tribute." But the High Priestess is going to choose the sacrifice this afternoon. Well, she'd better not choose me. On's diary describes how the current High Priestess's mother was able to form a deal with Zulrah and begin the tradition of appeasing it with sacrifices. It also explains why everybody in Zul-Andra has a name beginning with Zul. Indeed, Zul-Andra itself translates as Zul City in ancient Gnomish, and it also offers a clue on the origins of Zulrah and of the swamp in which it resides. On questions how the swamp formed, and notes that it doesn't smell natural. Most importantly, that old gnome woman and her children seem to know something about it, but they're not telling. The daughter lets slip that they're from some kind of settlement in the eastern mountains, though I've never heard of a gnome town there. There is, in fact, a gnomish settlement in the eastern mountains, Arposandra, an underground city founded by the evil gnome Glufri. Very little is known about this city, except for the fact that it was founded late in the 4th Age, and it is the site of dark experimentation. During the Path of Glufri, it is revealed that gnomes in Arposandra have been experimenting with the Anima Mundi, a sort of natural energy created by all natural things, a powerful and dangerous force particularly linked to spirit trees. Hazelmere explains that it would be possible to use powerful magics to separate the Anima Mundi from its source, which would produce a great deal of power that could be used in an unbridled way, but that this would unbalance the whole pattern of life. and would result in waste products of foul ichor. Indeed, this poison blocks a spirit tree's connection to the Anima Mundi in the eastern mountains where Arposandra is found. And the player is able to travel underground, into the bowels of the hidden gnomish city, where they discover the Poison Waste Dungeon, a network of caves polluted with dark black ooze, the results of Glufrey's foul experiments with the Anima Mundi. Through these caves, twisted abominations wander, warped terrorbirds and tortoises, more powerful than their natural kin, with tendrils sprouting from their twisted bodies. These are the results of failed experiments to create intelligent creatures, such as those who serve as guards for Arposandra. Perhaps these transformations were the sole reason for Glufrey's experiments with the Anima Mundi, or only part of it. But regardless, the caverns below his city are filled with the sad, monstrous forms of failed attempts. But most damning of all is the entrance to this dungeon, a gigantic sewer outfall where the toxic sludge from Arposandra pours out into Tiranon, into the poison swamp where Zulrah dwells. With this in mind, it makes sense that the first High Priestess, as described by Own, seemed to know something about this giant, unnatural swamp. Perhaps it would also explain how she so quickly understood what Zulrah was and what it wanted, if it was a result of gnomish experimentation, a twisted, intelligent form of a natural being, much like the terrorbirds of Arposandra. This idea would explain not only the swamp itself, but the serpent-god too. However, there exists another book, the Stained Journal found in the Great Library in Privethinus, that offers further insight. It is written by an unnamed Dragonkin, extremely powerful beings who created the dragons themselves. The Dragonkin describes arriving in southern Tiranon, after those filthy humans drove his kin into hiding. They describe their new home as a putrid wasteland full of all sorts of wonderful chemicals to test on my experiments. A massive swamp that is nearly abandoned. Despite the Dragonkin conflicts taking place thousands of years before the founding of Arposandra and the formation of the Poison Waste, this journal appears to have been written in more recent years. Of course, the Dragonkin mentions the swamp itself, but also obnoxious little humans running around and disappearing into their holes in the mountains, referring to the Arposandrian gnomes. Strangely, the Dragonkin also refers to his colleagues as having their secluded little islands scattered around the world, as if they were writing in the past. But the only logical answer for this is that they arrived in Tiranon not long before the current age, so the swamp and Arposandra existed. The Dragonkin sets to work. They find serpents with venomous tails, spit as poisonous as the swamp itself, and power over magic that rivals even worms living in the swamp, and intend to create a serpent under their command to kill anyone they please. The failures from these experiments, which they refer to as Vorkath, or weakling in the Dragonkin language, are dumped into the swamp. However, one particular Vorkath survived this. In what the Dragonkin describes as a miracle, the serpent I had such high hopes for but ultimately had to destroy has survived and is now unlike any of my other creations. It towers over even me now, and it's smart. I can see intelligence in its eyes. The discarded experiment had thrived in the swamp, deep in the foul ichor from Glufrey's experiments, perhaps absorbing the evil powers of the swamp, the same dark forces that have warped the terrorbirds into something more powerful, more intelligent. The creature grew to a monstrous size and strength, with a keen mind. The Stained Journal notes, It's incredible how quickly its size and power grows in the swamp. These wastes truly are miraculous. The serpent's tail drips with poison, its fangs with venom, and even its physical self warps and changes with power. I've seen its scales grow cyan with magic as it shot a hole into the mountain. I've seen its body burn with the colour of magma as its tail smacked the toxic waters and created tidal waves. I've seen it create a smog so foul from its breath, it killed what little plant life was living on the swampy shores. I've even seen it control the other Vorkath of mine, the ones I disposed of and thought had rotted away in the wastes. My Vorkath is nothing of the sort at all. My beautiful serpent. My Zulrah. You are perfect. I gave my creation life. I gave it power. I gave it intelligence. I gave it a name. Now I require it to serve me. My Zulrah shall do my bidding, and help me destroy all who would dare to oppose me. My creation is always hungry. I'm sure it would enjoy eating my enemies. I've come to speak with it once again, to inform it of my plan of domination. It seems pleased. What a beautiful smile with those wicked fangs. The little Vorkath it controls are crowding and drooling at my feet. They look hungry too. Zulrah's toxic spit is dripping onto my head, but I'll let such behaviour slide. After all, my pet is hungry. The Stained Journal tells us how a failure, a discarded experiment dumped into the swamp, became something even the Dragonkin could not have imagined. A new god, who eventually consumed his creator. By the time the player arrives in Zul-Andra, generations have passed. The poison waste grows ever larger, ever fouler, and the serpent who rules it ever stronger, gorging on sacrifices and the latent magic of the toxic swamp in equal measure. Though the player can stop the sacrifice of the gnome child and slay the beast again and again, the god of the swamp lives on. A titan born of the carelessness of a dark gnome and the hubris of a dragonkin. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like and consider subscribing for more old school RuneScape lore. I've wanted to cover Zulrah for some time. The Poison Waste is such a fascinating and creepy part of the world. If this is the first video of mine you've seen, check out my channel for other lore videos on the Stranglewood, the Gorok Prison, and Tolna's Rift. And let me know in the comments what other aspects of this game's lore you'd like to see me cover. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.